I never thought a Tuesday night would become the dividing line between my ordinary life and something dangerous, consuming, and utterly beyond my control. My name is Nia Coleman, and I was just trying to survive another semester of design school while slinging drinks at the Velvet Room, a dimly lit bar on Chicago's South Side where the clientele ranged from harmless drunks to people you'd cross the street to avoid. I thought I'd seen it all. The gamblers, the cheaters, the guys who wore their crimes like cologne. But I'd never seen him. Dominic Falco walked in at 11:47, and the entire atmosphere shifted like someone had turned down the volume on reality itself. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. Everything about him commanded attention without asking for it. The tailored black suit that probably cost more than my tuition. The slicked-back dark hair that caught the light just right. The kind of jaw that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood power. His eyes were steel gray, cold and calculating, scanning the room with the precision of a predator assessing prey. I'd heard whispers about him before. Dominic Falco, the young boss who'd taken over the Falco family operations after his father's sudden retirement. Ruthless. Brilliant. Untouchable. He sat at the far end of the bar, ordered a whiskey, neat without looking at me, and proceeded to do absolutely nothing but observe. I tried to ignore the way my hands trembled slightly as I poured his drink, tried to pretend that the weight of his presence wasn't making my skin prickle with awareness. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just watched everything with an intensity that made me wonder if he could see through walls, through lies, through people. Then it happened. A glass shattered near the pool table. Everyone turned, and in that split second of distraction, Dominic moved. He was beside me before I could blink, his body angled protectively, his hand hovering near the small of my back without quite touching. His voice, when it came, was low and absolute, the kind of voice that didn't expect to be questioned. Stay close to me, and don't ask why. My breath caught. Before I could process his words, before I could demand an explanation or pull away or do anything rational, a gunshot cracked through the night outside. The sound was unmistakable, followed by shouting, screeching tires, chaos erupting like a wound splitting open. Dominic's hand closed around my waist with surprising gentleness, considering the steel in his grip, and he pulled me down behind the bar with fluid efficiency, shielding my body with his as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Stay down," he ordered, his breath warm against my ear. I heard him snap his fingers twice, some kind of signal, and suddenly 3 men I hadn't even noticed before were blocking the main entrance, weapons drawn but hidden beneath their jackets. The other patrons scattered like roaches when the lights come on, but Dominic kept me anchored there, his presence both cage and sanctuary. "What's happening?" I whispered, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. I said don't ask. His tone wasn't cruel, just final. Absolute. The kind of voice that had ended arguments and probably lives. Within minutes, he was moving me toward the back exit, his hand never leaving my waist, his body positioned between me and every potential threat. His men formed a human barrier as we slipped through the kitchen, past the stammering cook who wisely said nothing, and into the alley where a black SUV with tinted windows waited like a hearse. "Get in." "I'm not." "Now, Nia." The fact that he knew my name sent ice down my spine. I hadn't told him. Hadn't worn a name tag. He'd known who I was before he ever walked into that bar, and that realization made everything infinitely more terrifying. I climbed into the SUV because my instincts screamed that refusing would be worse, and because despite the fear coursing through my veins, some small part of me recognized that Dominic Falco had just saved my life from something I didn't yet understand. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Dominic slid in beside me, and the door locked with a finality that made my chest tighten. The driver pulled away smoothly, no squealing tires, no dramatic escape, just practiced efficiency that spoke of a man who'd evaded danger so many times it had become routine. I tried again. What's going on? Why? You're under my protection now. He stared straight ahead, his profile sharp enough to cut glass. Could be a few hours. Could be days. Protection from what? He finally looked at me, and the weight of that gaze was crushing. You really want to know? Or would you rather stay alive long enough to see tomorrow? I opened my mouth, closed it. Every instinct told me to fight, to demand answers, to jump out of this moving vehicle and take my chances with whatever was hunting me. But something in Dominic's eyes stopped me. Not cruelty, but something almost like resignation. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew exactly how it would end. Here's the rule, he said quietly, turning back to the window as Chicago's lights blurred past. You do what I tell you. You stay close. And you don't ask questions. Break that rule, and I can't protect you. Understand? That's not fair. Fair died about 2 hours ago when someone put a target on your back. His jaw clenched. So yes or no, Naya? Do you want to live? I swallowed hard, tasting copper and fear. Yes. Then follow the rule. The penthouse he took me to was sterile and beautiful. All glass and steel and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my childhood home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like we were gods surveying our domain. And for all I knew, in Dominic's world, we were. He showed me to a guest room with the same detached efficiency he'd shown in the car, pointed out the bathroom and the locked cabinet where he kept emergency supplies I probably didn't want to know about, and then paused at the door. Don't leave this floor, he said. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Don't call anyone. Don't post anything. Don't exist for anyone outside these walls. For how long? Until I say otherwise. And if I refuse? Something flickered in his eyes then. Pain, maybe, or memory. Then you'll be dead by morning and I'll have to live with that. Your choice. He left before I could respond, the door closing with a soft click that felt like a cell door slamming shut. I stood there in the middle of that beautiful prison, my hands still shaking, my mind racing through everything that had happened in the last hour. None of it made sense. I was a bartender, a design student. Nobody. Why would anyone want me dead? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I wandered the penthouse like a ghost, noting the security cameras in every corner, the reinforced doors, the complete absence of personal effects that might tell me who Dominic Falco really was beneath the tailored suits and dead eyes. Around 3 a.m, I heard movement in the kitchen and found him there, cooking eggs with the same precise efficiency he applied to everything else. He didn't look surprised to see me. Can't sleep either, he asked without turning around. Would you? No. He plated the eggs, grabbed 2 forks, and slid one portion across the marble counter toward me. Eat. You'll need your strength. We ate in silence, the only sound the soft scrape of forks against porcelain and the distant hum of the city below. I studied him in the dim light, the way his shoulders carried tension like armor, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, the careful way he moved, always controlled, always ready. He caught me looking and raised an eyebrow. What? Why are you doing this? I told you not to ask questions. And I told you that's not fair. His lips twitched, almost a smile but not quite. Life's not fair, Nia. If it were, you wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be the man keeping you alive. He set down his fork with deliberate care. Get some rest. Tomorrow I'll tell you what you need to know. Not everything. Just enough. Enough for what? Enough to understand why breaking my rule would get us both killed. He left me there with those cryptic words hanging in the air like smoke, and I finally understood that whatever I'd stumbled into wasn't just dangerous. It was personal. The way he'd said both killed suggested that my survival was somehow tied to his, that protecting me wasn't just a job or a favor, but something deeper, something he couldn't quite bring himself to explain. I went back to the guest room and lay awake until dawn, listening to his footsteps pace the hallway outside my door like a sentinel who never slept, and wondered what kind of man saves a stranger's life while refusing to explain why her life needed saving in the first place. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of low voices speaking Italian in the living room. I emerged from the guest bedroom to find Dominic standing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply as he spoke in rapid-fire sentences I couldn't understand. When he saw me, he ended the call abruptly and pocketed the phone with the kind of smooth dismissal that suggested whoever was on the other end knew better than to call back uninvited. "Coffee's on the counter," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. "Black. I don't keep cream or sugar." "Of course you don't," I muttered, but I poured myself a cup anyway, grateful for something to do with my hands. The coffee was excellent, rich and strong, the kind that probably cost more per pound than I made in a week. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug and waited, because asking questions had been forbidden and I was curious to see if he'd actually volunteer information like he'd promised. He made me wait. Dominic settled onto the leather sofa with his own cup, legs crossed at the ankle, perfectly composed except for the muscle ticking in his jaw. Finally, he spoke. 3 nights ago, a man named Vincent Calabresi was executed in an alley 2 blocks from your bar. His voice was clinical, detached, like he was reading a weather report. He was the second in command of the Rossi family, our rivals. I sank into the chair across from him, my coffee suddenly tasting like ash. Witnesses reported seeing a woman flee the scene immediately after the shooting, Dominic continued, those steel-gray eyes fixed on me with unnerving intensity. Approximate age, mid-20s. Height, 5'6", wearing a denim jacket with a tear on the left sleeve. My stomach dropped. I looked down at my jacket, draped over the back of the chair. The tear was there, right where I'd caught it on a nail weeks ago and kept meaning to repair. My hand started shaking again. I began. But he held up one hand, silencing me. "I know you didn't. But the Rossi family doesn't know that. All they know is that someone matching your description was there when their second-in-command died, which makes you either the killer or a witness. Either way, you're a liability they need to eliminate." Jesus Christ. The mug slipped from my fingers, would have shattered on the floor if Dominic hadn't moved with impossible speed, catching it mid-fall and setting it safely on the table. He remained crouched in front of me, closer than he'd been since pulling me behind the bar, and for the first time I saw something other than ice in his expression. Concern, maybe, or recognition of shared trauma. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know they were coming for me?" "Because I know how they think. I know their patterns, their strategies, their methods of cleaning up loose ends." He straightened, putting distance between us again like proximity was dangerous. "And because I have people who watch the streets, who hear things, who told me the Rossis had identified a target matching your description and were planning to move last night. So you just showed up at my bar to save me?" "I showed up at your bar to assess the situation," he corrected. "Saving you was the logical next step." Logical. As if my life was a problem to be solved, a variable in whatever equation governed his world. But beneath the cold logic, I heard something else. The faint tremor of someone who'd made this choice not just with his head, but with something deeper, something he wouldn't acknowledge. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? What do you get out of this?" His expression shuddered completely. I told you not to ask questions, and I'm asking anyway. We stared at each other, locked in a silent battle of wills. I saw the moment he decided to give me something, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Saw it in the way his shoulders dropped slightly, the way his fingers curled into a fist and then relaxed. Let's just say I have my reasons for not wanting innocent people to die in crossfire, he said quietly, and leave it at that. The weight behind those words suggested a history I couldn't begin to imagine. Ghosts he carried that he'd never let me see. I wanted to push, to demand the real answer, but something in his eyes warned me that pushing would only make him retreat further behind those walls. How long? I asked instead. How long do I have to hide here? Until I can convince the Rossies that you're not their witness, that you're nobody, that killing you would accomplish nothing except bringing my family down on theirs in retaliation. And how long will that take? However long it takes. He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the morning light like some avenging angel painted in shades of gray. Days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. I have a life, Dominic. School, work, friends who'll worry. Your life is currently measured in hours if you step outside this building, he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Your school will wait. Your bar will find another bartender. Your friends will be told you had a family emergency and had to leave town. None of that matters if you're dead. You can't just decide, I can, and I did. He turned to face me, and the absolute certainty in his expression was almost frightening. You think I want you here? You think I enjoy having a civilian in my space, disrupting my routine, becoming a potential weakness my enemies can exploit? His voice dropped to something almost raw. This is as inconvenient for me as it is for you. But the alternative is watching you die, and that's not something I'm willing to do. Why not? I stood, crossing to him before I could second-guess the impulse. Why do you care if some random bartender lives or dies? Because... He stopped, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Because I've seen enough death. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed. Because you remind me... Another stop, this one more abrupt. Doesn't matter. The point is, you're under my protection now, whether you like it or not. You were going to say I remind you of someone. Drop it, Nia. Who was she? I said drop it. The command in his voice would have made most people back away, but I'd already crossed too many lines to care about one more. Was it your sister? Someone I couldn't save. The words exploded out of him, echoing in the vast space. Someone I should have protected and didn't, and who paid for my failure with her life. There. Is that what you wanted to hear? The silence that followed was deafening. Dominic turned away sharply, his shoulders rigid, and I realized I'd just witnessed something rare, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the Mafia boss. And that man was drowning in guilt so profound, it had shaped every decision he'd made since. I'm sorry, I said softly. I didn't mean to. Save your apologies. His voice was flat again, emotionless. And understand something, Nia. I'm not doing this because I like you, or because I want anything from you. I'm doing this because I failed once, and I won't fail again. You stay alive, I sleep better at night. That's the extent of our arrangement. But I'd heard the truth beneath the lie. He wasn't just protecting me to assuage his guilt. He was protecting me because something about me had reached through all those carefully constructed walls and touched something he thought was dead. Maybe I looked like her. Maybe I reminded him of who she'd been. Whatever the reason, it terrified him. And that terror was the real reason he'd forbidden questions. Because every question brought us closer to acknowledging what was happening between us in this forced proximity. That night, after a dinner we ate in near silence, I found him standing on the balcony despite the October chill, a glass of whiskey in his hand and that same haunted look in his eyes. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and joined him without asking permission, and for a long time we just stood there, watching the city lights blur into stars. Her name was Maria, he said finally, so quietly I almost didn't hear. My younger sister. She was 19 when she witnessed something she shouldn't have, something that made her a target. I promised our father I'd protect her. I failed. Dominic. They killed her in front of me, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Made me watch. Made sure I understood that my protection meant nothing, that my power meant nothing, that I was nothing. He drained the whiskey in one swallow. So when I heard there was another young woman, another innocent who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, another target marked for death, he trailed off, but I understood. You saw a chance to rewrite history. I saw a chance to not be completely useless. He set the glass down with careful precision. But here's what you need to understand. I can only protect you while you're here, while you're close. The moment you leave, the moment you're out of my sight, all bets are off. So when I say stay close and don't ask why, it's not a power play. It's survival. For both of us. And there it was. The silent condition he'd been dancing around since he'd pulled me behind that bar. He could only keep me safe if I stayed within reach, and keeping me safe was the only thing holding together whatever fragile peace he'd made with his sister's death. I was his second chance, his redemption, his penance. And God help us both, because I was starting to understand that leaving might destroy him as thoroughly as staying was terrifying me. The days blurred together in a strange rhythm I'd never experienced before, slow and tense and intimate in ways that had nothing to do with physical touch. Dominic ran his empire from the penthouse, a constant stream of phone calls in Italian and English and occasionally Russian, his voice shifting between languages with the fluid ease of someone who'd grown up in multiple worlds. I learned to recognize the different tones, the clipped efficiency when discussing legitimate business, the cold fury when addressing threats, the careful neutrality when negotiating with people he didn't quite trust. And then there were the moments when he forgot I was watching, when his guard dropped, and I glimpsed the man underneath. The way he made breakfast every morning at exactly 6:30, moving through the kitchen with the quiet competence of someone who'd learned to take care of himself long ago. The way he read, consuming books in 3 or 4 different languages, his fingers tracing the words like he was memorizing them. The way he stood at the windows late at night, drinking whiskey and staring at the city with an expression so bleak it made my chest ache. On the 4th day, I found him cooking again. This time it was pasta, the scent of garlic and tomatoes filling the penthouse with something that felt almost like home. I watched from the doorway as he worked, his movements precise and practiced, and when he noticed me, he didn't tell me to leave. My grandmother taught me, he said, answering the question I hadn't asked. Said a man who couldn't feed himself was a man who'd always be dependent on others. She didn't raise dependent men. She sounds formidable. She was terrifying. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. 5 feet tall, and could silence a room full of soldiers with one look. She died when I was 16, but I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me to stand up straighter, speak more clearly, never show weakness. He stirred the sauce with deliberate care. Sometimes I wonder what she'd think of who I became. I think she'd be proud you remembered her lessons. Or disappointed I used them to build an empire on blood and fear. He tasted the sauce, added more salt. Set the table. This is almost ready. We'd fallen into this pattern. Him cooking, me setting the table, both of us pretending this was normal, that we were normal, that we hadn't been thrown together by violence and circumstance. The pasta was incredible, rich and complex, and I told him so. He shrugged like it was nothing, but I saw the pleased flicker in his eyes. Why the Mafia? I asked between bites, unable to help myself. You're clearly intelligent, educated, talented. You could have been anything. Could I? He set down his fork, considering the question with more seriousness than I expected. When you're born into this world, when your last name carries weight and history and blood, you don't get to choose who you become. You inherit it. The businesses, the territories, the enemies, the code. My father's father was a soldier. My father became a boss. I was always going to follow that path. But Maria was different. She was going to get out, go to college, become a doctor, build a life far away from all this. His voice roughened. I promised her I'd make sure she could, that I'd protect her long enough for her to escape. And I failed. The weight of that failure sat between us like a third presence at the table. I reached across, covered his hand with mine before I could think better of it. His skin was warm, calloused in unexpected places, and he stared at our joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. "You're not failing now," I said softly. "Haven't I?" He pulled away, standing abruptly and carrying his plate to the sink. "You're a prisoner here, Naya. Under guard, cut off from your life, dependent on me for survival. How is that not failure? Because I'm alive. Because you're keeping me alive, even though it costs you." I stopped, realizing what I'd been about to say. "Costs me what?" He turned, his eyes sharp. "Say it. Safety. Showing weakness to your enemies. They know you're protecting someone, which means they know you care about something other than power and profit. That makes you vulnerable." Yes. The single word was heavy with admission. And when you're vulnerable in this world, people exploit it. They find what you care about and they destroy it just to watch you break. He moved closer, his intensity almost overwhelming. "Which is why my rule exists. Stay close. Stay silent. Stay alive. Because the moment anyone realizes you matter to me beyond a strategic asset, you become the perfect weapon to use against me." "Do I?" I stood to face him, my heart hammering. "Matter to you?" The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, you remind me what it feels like to protect something without calculation. To want someone safe not because it serves a purpose, but because the alternative is unthinkable." His hand lifted, almost touching my face before he caught himself and pulled back. "So, yes, you matter, which is exactly the problem." Before I could respond, his phone rang. The specific ringtone I'd learned meant urgent business. He answered in Italian, his expression hardening with each word, and when he ended the call, the brief vulnerability was gone, replaced by the cold strategist. "Pack a bag," he ordered. "We're moving locations." "What? Why?" "Because someone leaked that I'm keeping a protected witness here, and we have maybe 20 minutes before this building is surrounded." He was already moving, pulling out a duffel bag and filling it with practiced efficiency. "Do what I taught you. Essentials only. We leave in 10. My hands shook as I threw clothes into the bag he'd given me, my mind racing. How had they found us? Who had leaked the information? And where could we possibly go that would be safer than this fortress of glass and steel? But I didn't ask questions because the look on Dominic's face told me that every second counted, that hesitation could mean death. We left through a private elevator I hadn't known existed, descended into an underground garage where a different SUV waited, this one older and less conspicuous. Dominic's security team was already there, 4 men in dark suits who moved with military precision, and I recognized one of them from the bar, the one who'd blocked the entrance while Dominic pulled me to safety. "Marco will drive," Dominic said, guiding me into the back seat with a hand on my lower back. "Angelo and Luca are running interference. Enzo's handling the leak." He slid in beside me, and the door locked with that same finality. "Seatbelt. This might get rough." It did. We'd barely left the garage when I heard the first gunshot, saw the flash of muzzle fire in the side mirror. Dominic pushed me down, his body covering mine as Marco accelerated with the kind of controlled aggression that spoke of extensive training. More shots, the rear window shattering, someone screaming orders in Italian through the radio. "Stay down," Dominic commanded, his weight pressing me into the seat, his heart hammering against my back. I could smell his cologne mixed with gunpowder and fear, could feel the tension in every line of his body as he shielded me from bullets meant to end my life. The chase lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. When we finally lost the pursuers in a maze of side streets and industrial warehouses, Marco pulled into an abandoned building and killed the engine. The silence was deafening except for our ragged breathing. "Everyone alive?" Dominic asked, his voice steady despite the way his hands trembled slightly as he pulled away from me. "We're good, boss," Angelo responded. "Enzo says the leak came from the security company. He's handling it." "Permanently?" "Yes, sir." I didn't ask what permanently meant. I was learning that some questions had answers I didn't want to hear. Instead, I focused on the feel of Dominic's hand still resting on my shoulder, grounding me, reminding me I was alive when I should have been dead. "Where are we going?" I asked when I could trust my voice. "Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere off the grid." He finally met my eyes, and I saw the fear he was trying to hide. "Somewhere I can keep you safe until this ends. And if it doesn't end, if they keep coming, then I keep fighting." His jaw set with determination. "Because that's the silent condition you still haven't fully understood, Naya. I don't just protect you because you remind me of Maria. I protect you because losing you would destroy what's left of my humanity. And I'm selfish enough to need that humanity, even if keeping it might cost me everything." The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest, and terrifying in its implications. Because he was right. We were both trapped now. Me by the circumstances that had made me a target, him by the choice he'd made to save me, and neither of us could walk away without destroying the other. The safe house turned out to be a cabin 2 hours north of Chicago, buried deep in woods that seemed designed to swallow secrets. It was smaller than the penthouse, more rustic, with wood-paneled walls and furniture that looked handmade. Dominic explained it had belonged to his grandfather, a place the old man had used when he needed to disappear from the family business for a while. No one in the current organization knew it existed, except Dominic and his most trusted lieutenant. "We'll be safe here," he said, carrying our bags inside while Marco performed a security sweep. "At least for a few days while I figure out our next move." I wanted to ask what the next move could possibly be, how we could ever escape an enemy that seemed to have unlimited resources and reach. But I was learning to read Dominic's moods, and right now, he wore the expression of a man barely holding himself together. So instead, I explored the cabin, noting the well-stocked kitchen, the single bedroom with a bed that was definitely not big enough for 2 people, and the living room dominated by a stone fireplace that hadn't been used in years. "You take the bedroom," Dominic said when Marco left and we were alone. "I'll sleep out here." "That's not negotiable." He was already pulling blankets from a closet, setting up his makeshift bed with the efficiency of someone who'd slept in worse places. "You need rest, real rest, and you won't get it if you're worried about me on the couch." "I'm worried about you anyway," I admitted. "You haven't slept more than a few hours at a time since this started." "I sleep when I can afford to let my guard down." He positioned himself between the door and the rest of the cabin, a human barrier against any threat. "Right now, I can't afford it." I wanted to argue, to tell him he'd be useless if he collapsed from exhaustion, but the set of his shoulders told me it would be pointless. So I retreated to the bedroom, changed into the borrowed sleepwear he'd packed for me, and lay in the darkness listening to him move around the cabin, checking locks, testing windows, settling finally into that vigilant stillness I'd come to recognize. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion won. I woke sometime in the early hours to the sound of a nightmare. Dominic's voice, rough with terror, speaking rapid Italian mixed with English. No, please not her. Take me instead, Maria. No. I was out of bed before I fully processed what I was doing, crossing to where he thrashed on the couch, caught in whatever hell his subconscious had dragged him into. His face was contorted with anguish, sweat dampening his hair, and without thinking I touched his shoulder, gently at first, then more firmly when he didn't wake. Dominic, it's okay. Wake up. His eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused, and for a terrifying moment I saw him reach for the gun I hadn't known he kept under the pillow. Then recognition flooded in and he sagged back, dropping the weapon with shaking hands. Fuck, he breathed. Fuck, I could've. But you didn't. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hand still on his shoulder. You were having a nightmare. I don't want to talk about it, I know, but maybe you should anyway. He looked at me for a long moment, something breaking behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he sat up, running both hands through his hair in a gesture of utter defeat. It's always the same. I'm there, in that warehouse, watching them bring her in. She's crying, begging me to do something, and I can't move. Can't speak. Can't save her. And then he stopped, his breath coming faster. Then they make me watch as they kill her. Slowly, while she screams my name and asks why I'm not helping her. God, Dominic. The worst part? His laugh was bitter, broken. The real memory is worse. Because in reality, I wasn't frozen. I fought. I killed 3 of them before they subdued me. And Maria's last words weren't asking why I didn't help. They were telling me it wasn't my fault, that she loved me, that I shouldn't blame myself. He looked at me with eyes full of ghosts. But I do. Every single day, I blame myself for not being faster, stronger, smarter, for not protecting her the way I promised. I didn't have words adequate to that kind of pain, so I did the only thing I could. I wrapped my arms around him and held on while he shook with silent sobs he'd probably been holding back for years. He resisted at first, his body rigid with the instinct to never show weakness, but then something in him surrendered, and he buried his face against my shoulder and broke. We stayed like that for a long time, past the point where my arms ached and my legs went numb from the awkward position. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer, like he'd purged something poisonous. I'm sorry, he said roughly. That was human, I interrupted. That was human, which you're allowed to be, despite what your world demands. My world doesn't allow for human. He stood, putting distance between us again. Being human gets you killed, gets the people you care about killed. It's a luxury I can't afford. Is that why you won't admit that this... I gestured between us, at the space heavy with everything unspoken. Is more than just you protecting a witness? There is no this, he said, but the words lacked conviction. There's a mafia boss keeping a civilian alive. That's all. Liar. Yeah, you cook for me. You remember how I take my coffee even though I only mentioned it once. You position yourself between me and every door, every window, every possible threat. You have nightmares about failing to protect me the way you failed to protect Maria. I stood to face him. Those aren't the actions of a man who's just doing his duty. They're the actions of a man who's trying not to fuck up twice, he countered. But he didn't move away when I stepped closer. Then why does it feel like you're terrified of something more than my death? I was close enough now to see the pulse jumping in his throat, to feel the heat radiating from his skin. What are you really afraid of, Dominic? The silence stretched taut between us, charged with possibility and danger. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm afraid that if I let myself care about you the way I want to, I'll lose focus. Make mistakes, get you killed because I was too busy feeling instead of thinking. His hand lifted, fingertips brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. I'm afraid that you're already under my skin in ways that make me vulnerable, and I'm afraid that even knowing that, I can't make myself push you away. Then don't. My heart was racing, my breath coming fast. Don't push me away. You don't understand what you're asking. But his thumb was tracing my jawline now, his eyes dark with want and fear in equal measure. If I let this happen, if I cross that line, there's no going back. You become the thing that can destroy me, the weakness my enemies will exploit, the reason I might hesitate at the exact wrong moment. Or I become the reason you fight harder, the reason you survive instead of just existing. I covered his hand with mine, holding it against my face. You're not the only one who's afraid, Dominic. I'm terrified. Of this situation, of your world, of what I'm starting to feel for you. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. He stared at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a variable that didn't fit into any equation he'd ever calculated. Then slowly, inevitably, he closed the distance between us and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like years of denial, like all the feelings he'd been trying to suppress since the moment he'd pulled me behind that bar and decided my life mattered more than his carefully constructed walls. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my hands fisting in his shirt, all the fear and tension and forced proximity igniting into something that felt like salvation and damnation wrapped together. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "This is a mistake," he said. "Probably. It makes everything more complicated." "Definitely. I still can't promise you'll survive this." "I know." I pulled back to meet his eyes. "But I'd rather face it with you than hide from it alone." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, some internal battle resolved. "Then we do this my way. You still follow my rules. You still stay close. But now..." He paused, something almost like vulnerability crossing his face. "Now when I say stay close, it's not just strategy. It's because I need you close. Understand?" "I understand. And if it comes down to a choice between my life and yours, you let me make the sacrifice. No arguments, no heroics. Promise me." "Dominic." "Promise me, Nia." His hands cupped my face, his eyes fierce. "Because I've already lost one person I cared about. I won't survive losing two." I wanted to argue, to tell him that his life was worth just as much as mine, but I saw the plea behind the command and understood that this was his line in the sand. "I promise." "Good." He kissed me again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the feel of it. "Now go back to bed. Tomorrow I need to make calls, arrange safe passage out of the country if necessary. You need rest. What about you? I'll rest easier knowing you're alive and safe in the next room." He guided me toward the bedroom, his hand warm on my lower back. "Go. I'll still be here in the morning." I went, but I left the door cracked open, and before I drifted off, I heard him settle back onto the couch, heard the soft sound of him breathing, and felt something shift in my chest. We'd crossed a line tonight, acknowledged something that made everything more dangerous and more real. And somehow, despite the fear and the impossibility of it all, I'd never felt safer in my life. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon, and the surreal realization that I'd fallen in love with a man who existed in a world designed to destroy anything soft or beautiful. I found Dominic in the kitchen, phone wedged between his shoulder and ear, speaking in rapid Italian while simultaneously monitoring something on his laptop. When he saw me, his expression softened infinitesimally, a change most people wouldn't notice, but I'd become an expert in reading his micro-expressions. He ended the call, poured me coffee exactly how I liked it, despite claiming he didn't keep cream or sugar, and slid a plate of perfectly cooked breakfast across the counter. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious enough to make my stomach clench. That's never a good way to start a conversation. "No." He sat across from me, his food untouched. Enzo found out who leaked your location. It was someone in my own organization. A soldier who was bribed by the Rossis to provide information on my movements and any unusual protective actions. What happened to him? He's been handled. The flatness in Dominic's voice told me everything I needed to know about what handled meant, and I forced myself not to react. But before Enzo could question him thoroughly, he admitted something else. The Rossis don't actually care about you as a witness anymore. I set down my fork, my appetite vanishing. What do you mean? I mean they found the actual woman who witnessed the Calabrese execution, questioned her, determined she didn't see anything useful, eliminated her. He said it so matter-of-factly, like murder was just another item on a to-do list. You stopped being their target 3 days ago. The room tilted slightly. Then why? Because they realized something better. His jaw clenched. They realized that keeping you in danger keeps me distracted, that protecting you makes me vulnerable, that you've become exactly what I was afraid you'd become, a weapon they can use against me. He stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. They're not trying to kill you anymore, Nia. They're trying to kill you in front of me, to make me watch the way they made me watch with Maria, to break me completely. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. So what do? We have 2 options. He stopped pacing, braced his hands on the counter. Option 1, I put you on a plane tonight. New identity, new life, somewhere far away from Chicago and this world. You'd be safe, free. You'd never have to see me or deal with any of this again. And option 2? Option 2 is more dangerous, more complicated, and infinitely more selfish on my part. He looked at me then, and the raw want in his eyes stole my breath. You stay. I end this war with the Rossis permanently, using methods that will probably cost me parts of my humanity I've been trying to preserve. And when it's over, if we both survive, you decide whether a life with me is worth the constant danger and moral compromise. That's not really a choice. No, he agreed, it's not. Because I know what I should do. Put you on that plane, keep you safe, let you live a normal life with a normal man who doesn't have blood on his hands and enemies at his door. But I'm too fucking selfish to do it without giving you the option to stay. I stood, crossed to him, took his face in my hands, and made him look at me. I'm not getting on a plane. Nia, I'm not leaving you to face this alone. I'm not walking away from what we've started here, no matter how dangerous or complicated it is. My voice was steady, certain. So what's the plan for option 2? How do we end this? He searched my face for a long moment, then pulled me into a fierce embrace, his face buried in my hair. You're either the bravest or the most foolish woman I've ever met. Probably both. I held him just as tightly. Now tell me the plan. The plan, as Dominic explained it over the next hour, was essentially declaring war. Not the quiet, strategic maneuvering that usually characterized mob conflicts, but an all-out assault designed to cripple the Rossi family's infrastructure so completely they'd have no choice but to negotiate peace. It would require help from the other Italian families, calling in favors Dominic had been saving, and making promises that would bind him to alliances he'd previously avoided. It's risky, he admitted. If we fail, if they retaliate successfully, we'll both end up dead, or worse. And even if we succeed, the cost. He trailed off, but I understood. The cost would be measured in bodies, in blood, in the complete abandonment of any pretense that he was anything other than what the world already thought him to be. When? I asked. I can have everything in place within 48 hours. But Nia, you need to understand. Once I make these calls, once I set this in motion, there's no stopping it. And you'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life. Because everyone will know you're the reason I started this war. I'm already a target. At least this way, we're fighting back. He cupped my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with heartbreaking tenderness. How did I get so lucky and so cursed at the same time? To find you in the middle of all this chaos? Maybe that's exactly when people like us are supposed to find each other, I suggested. When everything's already broken, so we have nothing left to lose. I have everything to lose. His voice was rough with emotion. I have you. We spent the next 2 days in a strange limbo. Dominic making calls and arrangements while I learned more about his world than I'd ever wanted to know. I met his most trusted men via video calls, saw the respect and fear in their eyes when they looked at their boss, understood finally the weight he carried as the man responsible for hundreds of lives and livelihoods. I learned that the Falco family controlled legitimate businesses too. Construction, waste management, several restaurants, and that Dominic had been slowly transitioning toward legal operations before this war had pulled him back into the violence he'd been trying to escape. That was the plan, he told me one night as we sat by the fireplace he'd finally lit. Build the legal empire strong enough to abandon the illegal one. Give the next generation a choice I never had. But now... He stared into the flames, his expression bleak. Now I'm right back where I started. Maybe worse. Not worse, I argued. Because this time you're fighting for something more than territory or pride. You're fighting for a future. For us. For us. He repeated softly, like he was testing out the words. I've never had an us before. Never let myself want one. Do you want one now? He looked at me then, firelight playing across his features, making him look both dangerous and devastatingly vulnerable. More than I've ever wanted anything, which terrifies me, because wanting things in my world is how you lose them. I moved closer, settled against his side, felt his arm come around me automatically. Then we'll just have to make sure we don't lose. The attack, when it came, wasn't from the Rossies. It was from someone closer. We were sleeping, actually sleeping, curled together on the too small couch because neither of us could bear to be apart, when the sound of breaking glass jerked us both awake. Dominic moved faster than I'd ever seen, shoving me behind the couch and drawing the gun he always kept within reach. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice cold and deadly. "No matter what happens, stay down." But I couldn't stay down, couldn't just hide while he faced danger alone. I watched through the gap between the couch and the wall as 3 men entered through the shattered window, weapons drawn, and recognized one of them from the video calls. One of Dominic's own soldiers. "Sorry, boss," the traitor said, not sounding sorry at all. "But the Rossies offered me something you can't, a way out of this life with enough money to disappear. All I had to do was deliver your pretty little witness." Dominic's laugh was devoid of humor. "You think they'll let you live? You're a loose end, Marco. Dead man walking. Maybe, but at least I'll die rich." He raised his gun. Nothing personal. Everything happened so fast. Dominic fired, taking down one attacker. The traitor fired back, catching Dominic in the shoulder. I screamed, couldn't help it, and the sound drew attention exactly as Dominic had feared. One of the men came around the couch, grabbed me by the hair, dragged me up as I fought and clawed. "Drop it, Falco, or I put one in her head right now." Dominic froze, blood spreading across his shoulder, his face a mask of controlled fury. But his eyes were wild with the same terror I'd seen in his nightmares, the same helpless rage that came from watching someone he cared about be hurt while he could do nothing. "Let her go," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Take me instead. Kill me, and you get credit for ending the great Dominic Falco. The Rossies will pay triple whatever they promised." "Dominic, no," I started, but the man holding me pressed the gun harder against my temple. "Tempting," the traitor mused, "but I think I'll take the original deal. Enzo, grab her. We're leaving. That's when Dominic did something I didn't expect. He dropped his gun. Completely. Raised his hands in surrender, his eyes never leaving mine. You want her? You go through me first. Fair fight, no weapons. You win, you take her and leave me bleeding out. I win. You tell me who else in my organization the Rossies bought. The traitor actually considered it, ego warring with common sense. And in that moment of hesitation, Dominic moved. Not toward the traitor, but toward me, shoving the man holding me so hard we both stumbled. I heard gunshots, felt Dominic's body cover mine again, protecting me even as he fought off 2 attackers with his bare hands and a bullet wound in his shoulder. It was brutal, efficient, terrifying. And when it was over, 3 bodies lay on the cabin floor and Dominic was on his knees, breathing hard, blood dripping from multiple wounds. But alive. We were both alive. I crawled to him, pressed my hands against the worst wound, his shoulder trying to stop the bleeding. You idiot, I sobbed. You stupid, reckless, had to protect you, he gasped. Only job that matters. Only thing. He swayed, and I caught him, eased him down. Don't you dare die on me, Dominic Falco. Don't you dare. Trying not to. His hand found mine, squeezed weakly. Phone. In my pocket. Call Enzo. He'll clean this up. Get us somewhere safe. I found the phone, made the call with shaking hands, and then I held him while we waited. Whispering promises I prayed I could keep. Telling him all the things I'd been too afraid to say before. And somewhere in my desperate litany of stay with me, and I love you, and we're going to survive this, I felt his hand tighten on mine and heard him whisper back. Love you too, so damn much. Worth dying for. Then live for me instead, I demanded. Live, and we'll end this war together. His smile was weak but genuine. Yes, ma'am. Enzo arrived with a doctor and a cleanup crew within 30 minutes, and as they loaded Dominic into a medical transport, he refused to let go of my hand. I climbed in beside him, held on tight, and made a silent vow that when he recovered, we'd finish what we'd started. Not just ending the war with the Rossies, but building something real from the ashes of all this violence. Because if loving Dominic Falco had taught me anything, it was that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is also the only thing worth doing. And I was done playing it safe. Dominic spent 3 days in a private medical facility, owned by someone who owed the Falco family enough favors to ask no questions. I stayed with him the entire time, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, eating barely anything, watching the monitors and jumping at every fluctuation in his heartbeat. He woke and slept in cycles, sometimes lucid enough to squeeze my hand and tell me to rest, sometimes lost in fevered dreams where he called for Maria and begged forgiveness for failures both real and imagined. On the 4th day, he finally woke clear-eyed and properly conscious. The first thing he said was, "You're still here." Where else would I be? I moved to his bedside, brushed the hair back from his forehead. You took 3 bullets protecting me. The least I can do is make sure you survive the recovery. 3? He winced, trying to sit up. Thought it was just the shoulder. Shoulder, side, and 1 grazed your leg. You lost a lot of blood, Dominic. You almost... My voice broke, and I couldn't finish. He pulled me down gently, ignoring his own pain to wrap his good arm around me. But I didn't. We're both still here. That's what matters. The traitors? I asked against his chest, needing to know. Enzo handled them, and found 2 more in the organization who were on the Rossi payroll. They've been dealt with. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I felt the tension in his body. The war I was planning? It's already started. While I was unconscious, Enzo followed my instructions. The Rossies have lost 3 major operations and 12 men. They're scrambling. Good. He pulled back to look at me, surprised. Good? Nia, people are dying. because of decisions I made. People were going to die anyway, I said firmly. At least this way, it's not us. And maybe when it's over, we can actually have a life instead of just survival. Something shifted in his expression. Acceptance, maybe, or the beginning of forgiveness for the choices he'd had to make. When it's over, he repeated. You really think there's going to be an after to all this? I know there is, because I'm not losing you now. Not after everything we've been through. I took his face in my hands, made him look at me. So you're going to heal. We're going to end this war. And then we're going to build something real. Something that doesn't require constant looking over our shoulders. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible, isn't it? He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, it's possible. Especially with the information Enzo extracted from the traitors before they died. We know the Rossi family's weaknesses now, their financial pressure points, which of their allies are wavering. We can end this, but it'll require me to make deals I swore I'd never make, ally with people I despise, and probably do things that'll give me nightmares worse than the ones I already have. Then I'll be there to wake you up from them, I promised. Every single one. He kissed me then, gentle despite the pain it must have caused, and I tasted salt. Whether from my tears or his, I couldn't tell. When we broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since I'd known him. Okay, he said. Okay, let's end this war and build our after. The final push came 2 weeks later, when Dominic was healed enough to move without tearing stitches, and Enzo had orchestrated enough pressure on the Rossi family's legitimate businesses to bring them to the negotiating table. The meeting was held in a neutral location, a hotel conference room overseen by representatives from the other major families who'd grown tired of the instability our war was causing. Dominic insisted I stay at the safe house, protected by his best men, but I refused. I'm the reason this started, I argued. I should be there when it ends. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Everything about us is dangerous, Dominic. But we face it together, or we don't face it at all. He wanted to argue. I could see it in his eyes. But he also understood that I needed this. Needed to see him finish what he'd started protecting me. Needed to know that I wasn't just someone he saved, but someone who stood beside him. So he relented, with conditions. I'd stay in an adjoining room, armed guards at both doors, an escape route planned if things went wrong. I agreed, because I understood that his need to protect me was as fundamental as my need to support him. The negotiations were brutal. I listened through the door as Dominic laid out terms with the cold precision of a general accepting surrender. The Rossis would cease all operations in Falco territory, pay reparations for the lives lost during the conflict, and publicly acknowledge that I was under the permanent protection of the Falco family, meaning any action against me would be considered an act of war against every ally Dominic had secured. The Rossi representative tried to negotiate, to maintain some pride, but Dominic was relentless. I heard him speak about Maria for the first time publicly, using her death as evidence of what happened when families targeted civilians, making it clear that he would burn their entire organization to ash before he'd allow me to suffer the same fate. When the Rossi boss finally agreed to terms, the relief in the room was palpable. Documents were signed. Witnesses from the other families nodded approval, and Dominic walked out of that conference room looking 10 years older, but infinitely lighter, like he'd finally set down a burden he'd been carrying since his sister's death. He found me waiting, pulled me into his arms without caring who saw, and whispered, "It's over. You're safe now. We're both safe." I held him tight, feeling the tremor in his body that spoke of adrenaline crash, and delayed fear, and the overwhelming relief of survival. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He pulled back, cupped my face with both hands. "Now we figure out what our life looks like. I'm stepping back from the family operations. Enzo's going to take over most of the day-to-day. I'm focusing on the legitimate businesses, trying to build something I can be proud of instead of something I have to hide. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. And I'm going to spend every day proving to you that choosing me wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Dominic. It was the only choice I could make and still be myself. Then marry me. The words tumbled out, unplanned and raw. I know it's fast. I know we've barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the future, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. So marry me, Nia. Build this after with me. Make all of this mean something. I should have been shocked. Should have asked for time to think, to process everything we'd been through. But instead, I heard myself say, "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." His smile was blinding, transforming his whole face from dangerous to beautiful. And he kissed me there in the hallway, while his security team politely looked away, and the weight of the past weeks finally lifted. The wedding was small, private, held in the same garden where Dominic's grandmother used to grow tomatoes for her famous sauce. His family came, those who'd survived, those who'd stayed loyal, and a handful of people from my old life who'd forgiven my sudden disappearance once I explained a sanitized version of what had happened. We exchanged vows under a pergola covered in late-blooming roses, and when Dominic slipped the ring on my finger, his hands were steady for the first time since I'd known him. "I promise to protect you," he said softly, the traditional vows abandoned for something more honest. "Not because you're weak, but because you're everything to me. I promise to be honest, even when the truth is ugly. I promise to fight for us, for this life we're building, for the future we deserve. And I promise that you'll never, ever doubt that choosing you was the best decision I've ever made." I wiped tears from my cheeks, took a shaky breath, and gave him my own vows. "I promise to stand beside you, not behind you. To call you on your bullshit when you're being overprotective, and to hold you when the nightmares come. I promise to love every part of you, the good, the complicated, the damaged, and to never regret the choice I made to stay. And I promise that no matter what comes, you won't face it alone." When he kissed me, sealing those promises, I tasted the salt of his tears mixed with mine, and felt the last of my fear dissolve into something stronger. Certainty. We spent our honeymoon in the cabin where we'd first admitted our feelings, but this time there were no threats lurking in the shadows, no enemies tracking our location. Just two people learning how to exist in peace after surviving war. "Tell me something," I said one night, as we lay tangled together in front of the fireplace. "When you first saw me in that bar, before everything happened, did you know that it would end up like this?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. "I knew you were dangerous," he finally said. "Not because of the situation, but because of the way you looked at me. Like you could see past all the armor to the man underneath. And I knew that if I let you close, you'd destroy every wall I'd built to survive." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "I just didn't know I'd be grateful for the destruction. Are you grateful? Every single day." He shifted to look at me, his eyes serious. "You saved me, Nia. Not just from the Rossies or from the war, but from becoming something completely cold and empty. You reminded me what it felt like to be human, to care about something more than strategy and survival. So yeah, I'm grateful. Even for the fear, the danger, all of it, because it brought you into my life." I kissed him, slow and deep, and felt the future unfold before us like a promise. It wouldn't be easy. We both knew that. Dominic's past would always cast shadows, and my presence in his life would always attract some level of danger. But we'd faced worse and survived. We'd built something real from chaos and fear, and the impossible chemistry between a Mafia boss and the bartender he'd saved without knowing he was saving himself too. 6 months later, I graduated with my design degree and opened a small studio specializing in residential renovations. Dominic funded it without hesitation, proud to support something completely separate from his world. He made good on his promise to step back from the family business, transitioning into legitimate real estate development and philanthropy that slowly began to change the Falco Names Association from fear to respect. We bought a house, not a penthouse or a safe house, but an actual home with a yard and neighbors who had no idea who Dominic Falco really was. We planted a garden in honor of his grandmother, and I learned to make her tomato sauce under his patient instruction. We had movie nights and lazy Sunday mornings and arguments about whose turn it was to do the dishes. We had a life. And when the nightmares still came, when Dominic woke gasping and reaching for weapons that weren't there anymore, I held him and reminded him of all the promises we'd made and kept. When my own anxiety spiked, when I caught myself checking exits and cataloging threats without meaning to, he understood without judgment and pulled me close until the fear passed. We built our after. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and worth every terrifying moment that had brought us together. 1 year after that night in the bar, when Dominic Falco had walked into my life and said, "Stay close, and don't ask why," I finally understood the silent condition he'd been unable to articulate. He could only survive in a world this dark if he had something worth surviving for. And somehow, impossibly, I'd become that something. We'd become each other's reason to keep fighting, keep building, keep believing that love could exist even in the darkest places. Not despite the danger, but because of what we'd been willing to sacrifice to protect it. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined as a girl. It was better, because it was real, earned in blood and fear, and the terrifying choice to trust someone with the power to destroy you. And every day when Dominic looked at me with those storm-gray eyes that had once been cold and calculating, but were now warm with something that looked like peace, I knew I'd make the same choice again. Stay close. Don't ask why. Because sometimes, the best things in life come with conditions you can't fully understand until you're brave enough to accept them. And I'd accepted Dominic Falco, all of him, the darkness and the light, and built a life that proved love wasn't about avoiding danger. It was about finding someone worth facing it for.